Greetings, fellow men. Servus Männer. It's Red Pill Germany again, and today I want to continue my series on Angela Merkel and her rise to power, basically. So in part 2, I stopped in April 2000 when Angela Merkel was elected the head of the CDU, making her the opposition leader after Helmut Kohl lost the election and Gerhard Schröder became Chancellor of Germany in a coalition between the SPD, the Social Democratic Party of Germany, and the Green Party, so the red-green coalition years. So the main actors in this part are, of course, Angela Merkel, Gerhard Schröder as the Chancellor, and then Edmund Stoiber. Edmund Stoiber was at that time the Ministerpräsident, so the governor of Bavaria. And I have to say, I will just start describing Edmund Stoiber a little bit. So he was inner party competition, but it is a little more complicated. So let me explain that for a brief while. So the Christian Democratic Union of Germany, Angela Merkel's party, doesn't exist in Bavaria. Instead, Bavaria has its own Christian conservative party called CSU, the Christian Social Union. And that is basically just the Bavarian branch of the CDU, so to speak, but it is its own party and it didn't split off from the CDU, really. It was formed in Bavaria and it is more right-winged, more conservative than the CDU in the rest of Germany, as Bavaria is a little bit more traditional, a little bit more right-leaning than the rest of Germany in general, I would say. So the two parties, CDU and CSU, they are a sister party, so to speak, and they have a common faction in the Bundestag. There, they worked together always, of course, but they are technically separate parties. But for most practical purposes, one can see them as one party. And Germany never had a chancellor from Bavaria, from the CSU. The rest of Germany has a lot of prejudice against Bavarians and vice versa, by the way. It is just a big cultural difference. I mean, Bavaria is among the most successful states in the German Federation in terms of its economy. A lot of successful companies are from Bavaria. Our unemployment rate is very low. A lot of taxes are paid, so the Bavarian state is pretty well off financially, I would say, and its citizens tend to be more loyal to the state than in other parts of Germany, I would say. So the same scenario that you see in the European Union, for example, between states that are not fiscally sound and Germany, can also be observed within Germany. So if you take a state like Berlin or like North Rhine-Westphalia or something like that, they would not be like Germany if they were independent states in the European Union. They are not fiscally sound. They have a lot of problems, a lot of unemployment, and they cannot pay for their own maintenance, basically. So actually in Germany, the more successful states such as Hessen, Baden-Württemberg, Bayern, Saxony, I don't know. I mean, it fluctuates every year, but the more successful states, they have basically to pay for the deficit of the less successful countries. Of course, this causes then animosity between these different tribes, between these different states within Germany. So the same that can be seen in the EU now is nothing new to us Germans. We see that all the time within Germany, between North Rhine-Westphalia and Bavaria. So, and the next guy is Gerhard Schröder, the leader of the SPD, the Social Democrats at that time. So he was known as the automobile chancellor or as the media chancellor because he was very friendly to the industry, I should say, coming from Niedersachsen. So he was governor in the state where Volkswagen has its headquarters in Niedersachsen. And that means that he is probably very friendly to the automotive industry of Germany. And he also was very gifted when dealing with the media. So he said in order to steer the country or in order to run the country, he only needs the tabloid press and TV, basically. So he was very apt at dealing with the media as a politician. So overall, one can say that Stoiber was more the nerd. By the way, they're both lawyers. Stoiber was more the nerd who read through a lot of folders after hours and who knew all the facts and all the figures. And basically the A student nerd, while Schröder was very, he lacked a little bit in manners. He was full of confidence, boasting, making a lot of jokes all the time. So I think Schröder could really be characterized as the alpha guy, very confident. So he liked to cultivate this aura of success. The other stereotypical difference between Schröder and Stoiber is that while Stoiber is the steady father, the steady family guy who married his sweetheart from his youth basically, Schröder is not having kids, is not the family man, and he had a fourth wife already. So now I have to say that after Gerhard Schröder took over the government from Helmut Kohl, as a consequence of the German reunification and Kohl's very conservative strategy to not really change fundamental stuff in Germany, the financial situation was not the best. Because, as I mentioned in my earlier video, at that point in time, we got a lot of new citizens who never really paid into the systems, and the people from Western Germany had to basically bear the financial burden of the reunification. In this situation, it was clear that the standard of welfare that people in Western Germany were used to, and that for a brief amount of time also the people from East Germany after the reunification experience, was not sustainable anymore for long. So cuts were to be made, and they had to be made in order to continue the system. Think about pensions, think about healthcare, think about unemployment benefits and all these things. So one of the things that Gerhard Schröder needed to do, that he did, is basically called Agenda 2010, so the Agenda 2010, so to make Germany sustainable, to make them ready for the future, to avoid a big collapse, a big crash. And that was very painful for many Germans, and it destroyed basically the popularity of the Social Democrats for decades to come. And actually they're still suffering from that. So a lot of their supporters, a lot of their hardcore members felt betrayed, and they actually turned their back on the proud Social Democratic Party of Germany with a long history. So in brief, what he changed, the main thing basically is that if you are unemployed, that means if you paid into the system for years and years, and if you lose your job, you only get unemployment benefits for a certain amount of time, and then you're basically getting welfare, not unemployment benefits, but welfare, as if you had never worked in your life. And that, of course, felt like a big devaluation or a big stab in the back to many people who worked for a long time and then just became unemployed because the economy changed, or they were already 55 and they didn't get another job. It was too late for them to look in another industry, to open a new chapter in their professional lives. Those people felt really betrayed, and their whole families felt betrayed, and people thought this wasn't fair, this was not correct. But financially, or if you look at the raw numbers, that was maybe a necessary step at that moment in time. So I find it very interesting generally that it is much more easy for a left-wing politician to actually cut welfare than for a right-wing politician. Somehow left-leaning politicians get away with that stuff more easily than a right-wing politician, because the public thinks that the conservative right-wing person is anyway the enemy of all hard-working, working-class people, right? And they are just the friends of the banksters and the bosses. But when a social democrat does that, well, he might wreck the reputation of his party, but he somehow gets away with it, yeah? Just like Angela Merkel could open the borders as a quote-unquote conservative politician, and in some ways she is still more conservative than the Social Democrats, but she gets away with that. A left-wing person probably would have gotten a lot more resistance. Okay, and so in the coalition there was also a partner, the Green Party. And of course the Green Party had a lot of conditions for the Social Democrat Party in order to form the coalition. So they had a lot of things written in the coalition contract that meant a lot more spending, and that was a lot of green energy stuff, a lot of environmental friendly things, and this cost a lot of money. So if I wanted to be really mean and nasty and oversimplify stuff, I would say that Gerhard Schröder was responsible for cutting welfare, and Joschka Fischer and Trittin and all those Green Party guys, they were responsible for channeling the money that was freed up into Green Party utopian projects. And this is how it seemed to many people. So these are the reasons why already after a small amount of time, after the red-green government took over, they became really unpopular. It was actually not clear whether or not they get a second term in 2002. And when the conservative parties were debating who should run against Gerhard Schröder, Edmund Stoiber of Bavaria was very eager to run against Schröder. Merkel did the following. She visited Stoiber in Bavaria, in the town where he lived, for a common breakfast. And there she declared to him that she would not run against Schröder. She would basically support him. Yeah, Stoiber eagerly accepted that. So that was a very clever step of Merkel, maybe just in retrospect, but I think she knew what she was doing. She was still younger and she had not so much support in her own party. She had a lot of rivals within the party, like Koch and Friedrich Merz, another CDU politician. She just felt that if she supports the mighty Stoiber from Bavaria now, that she would maybe have a favor with him later on. And she can just wait and build her power base in the meantime. And that's exactly what she did. And I heard back then one of his speeches live. I visited the venue where he spoke. So he said things like that we need to save more money, we need to be more thrifty, we need to work harder, we have to work longer, life expectancy is going up, so we need to work longer, otherwise Germany is not sustainable. So even though he was running as the opposition leader and people thought that the acting chancellor was actually wasting too much money and cutting welfare too harshly, he spoke a lot about hard, necessary steps that need to be taken to make Germany sustainable again. So work harder, pay back all the debt so that we basically don't leave a lot of debt to our children. So I totally agree with that, but that also explains why he did not get all the votes that he could have gotten. So actually, Stoiber, being a Bavarian and therefore being not so popular in the rest of Germany outside of Bavaria, and with his "we need to work much harder" kind of speeches, surprisingly, and that shows you just how unpopular Schröder and Fischer were for most Germans. Yeah? It was a really close call in 2002. Red-Green, Schröder, together with the Green Party, they could continue their reign over Germany. They got a second term. So after 2002, it didn't really get much better, and people grew more and more dissatisfied with the welfare reforms and with the Green Party also being in power. So after the Social Democrats lost an election in North Rhine-Westphalia, where they actually, by default, I would almost say, were a strong party. The elections that were scheduled for 2006 actually were already held in 2005, you know. So normally we have federal elections every 4 years, but the situation was so drastic that basically the elections were held 1 year early. And in these elections now, Angela Merkel was running, and she could run because Edmund Stoiber, the guy that she supported earlier, was now favoring her. And I think that was the favor that she could call in with Edmund Stoiber. And now this election was very curious because in the polls, the CDU was leading basically. The Social Democrats were very far behind, but then Schröder could actually close the gap. So the race got really tight in the end. And still, the CDU and the CSU together, they won the election. But they were not able to form a coalition with their preferred partner, the Liberal Party, the FDP. Normally after elections we have something called the Elefantenrunde, the elephant gathering or round or something. It's a round table or something. And it is a meeting with the press and the heads of the most important parties, and they discuss the outcome now. And here, this was a very memorable scene, and I still remember seeing that live. That was so funny. Gerhard Schröder, I don't know what he did. Maybe he was so hyped up that his party actually could close the gap, or maybe he took some cocaine. I have no idea, but it was just hilarious. If he would just have shut up, it would maybe not have changed so much, but it was hilarious. Merkel was really quiet during that meeting, and the sister parties, the Union, the CDU, CSU, clearly won the election. They were the biggest party, but they couldn't have a coalition with their preferred partner. So Schröder then, even though the SPD had less votes, he basically said, Mrs. Merkel, if you really think that you will be Chancellor now, then you have another thing coming. Yeah, you must be so crazy, and it is very clear after all this one-sided reports against us by the media, how I managed to turn this election around. It is very clear that you will not become Chancellor and all that stuff. Yeah, so he basically said that even though he has less votes, he would still be Chancellor or something. So I don't know what he had smoked before that, and Merkel just sat there and listened. This is typical for her. Yeah, and then he just hung himself with his own rope, and she just handed him more rope basically. It was he said later that he was not happy with his performance in this discussion. Yeah. So, and then things moved rather fast, actually. There were some discussions whether or not, because the CDU is not one party, they have this, as I mentioned earlier, the sister party arrangement with the CSU, and if that is then, if the biggest party should be the one who has the chancellor right, or is the biggest faction in the parliament. But in the end, then, we had a so-called big coalition, that is a coalition of the two major parties, the CDU, CSU, and the Social Democratic Party. And Schröder, of course, was then not a part of this government anymore, as you could imagine. So what happened then is that other forces, other people in the Social Democratic Party, they negotiated then with Angela Merkel, and they formed a red-black government, so to speak. Yeah, and this is how Angela Merkel became the Chancellor of Germany. Yeah, in an environment where people were pretty fed up with the current Chancellor, who was a very peculiar character, I should say, and whose coalition partner, but also the environment and the situation in which he became Chancellor, forced him to do a lot of very unpopular steps that maybe other people couldn't have gotten away with for as long as he did, because he had a lot of charisma and he made these things happen. And later on, I think, my opinion, Germany profited from that as a country. So for many people, this was very hard to accept, which is understandable. But in this scenario, so to speak, Angela Merkel could wait for 4 more years, which turned out, in fact, to be 3 only in the end. And she very cleverly waited her turn. She basically let Edmund Stoiber go first, and then become stronger in her own party, eliminate some rivals, and then with the help of Stoiber, 3 years after 2002, in 2005, she was then running against the very unpopular Schröder and could become Chancellor of Germany. So, this is then basically the end of the series, how Angela Merkel rose to power in Germany. But I will continue making videos about her, really answering the questions of why, since 2005, she got re-elected, why she was for a certain time very popular actually in Germany, and what changed. And then, of course, in this fall, we have another election, and a lot of people say now Germany must get rid of Merkel. What is wrong with you guys? And I also want to comment on that and tell you why I think that it would maybe not be the worst thing, and maybe also very probable that she gets re-elected this year. Alright, so thanks for bearing with me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Servus, Kameraden.